Good morning and welcome. It's great to see so many people here. I don't know how many stayed at the Hilton, but it was an exciting morning. But I think things are about to get better with the keynote speaker today. Sylvia Martinez is the co-author of Invent to Learn, Making, Tinkering, and Engineering the Classroom, a book that has been called the Bible for classroom makers. And for those of you who do or don't know what a maker is or what they do, I can personally attest that it is a great concept. I have a 23-year-old non-traditional learner who just went to a place called the Columbus Idea Foundry, which is a large maker space that just opened in Columbus, Ohio, and it's life-changing for him. So I'm excited to hear what Sylvia has today, and I think it's going to be a great conversation. For the past 10 years, Sylvia has been president of Generation Yes. It's a nonprofit organization that evangelizes student leadership using modern technology and hands-on experience. She advocates globally and is an international speaker on such topics as making and thinking, the designing of classrooms, STEM, gender issues in technology, gaming and learning, and she weaves real-life examples into her learning, which I think makes all the difference in the world. Prior to her work in the maker community and the education community, she started her career designing high-frequency receiver systems and navigation software for GPS. So if you need help getting around the convention center today, Sylvia will be of assistance. So a fantastic hands-on experience and background combined with the education. I think it's going to be a wonderful speech today and a keynote. Sylvia holds a master's in education technology from Pepperdine, as well as a degree in electrical engineering from UCLA. So great combination and a great speaker to see us today, and I think it's going to be fantastic, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you today Sylvia Martinez.
Well, good morning. We had a lovely little wake up at the Hilton this morning, but we're all ready to go. We have to do this no matter what. So, my name's Sylvia Martinez. I'm really happy to be here with you guys today. I want to share with you some of the things that are happening in something called the Maker Movement. If you've heard of it or you haven't heard of it, we're going to be talking about it today, and the implications for school. So, I always like to share a little bit about myself because I think it's important to understand the lens through which you see learning. And the lens is typically the way you learned yourself. And I have to admit, I was a good student. I was one of those kids, which, you know, was a good thing. And people tell you that you're smart when you're good at school. I went to UCLA, I got an electrical engineering degree, and there were a lot of jobs at the time, and I live in Southern California, especially in aerospace. So one of the interviews, though, that I had really stood out to me. They told us, and we were a group of, you know, fresh-faced college kids, and they said, we're going to be doing something in the next few years that may be impossible. We're going to, we've promised the government we're going to give them a system which can go in a backpack, in a jet plane, in a submarine. It will tell you where you are anywhere in the world within 10 meters and nanosecond accuracy, no matter what the weather, no matter what the time, no matter where you are on the globe. And they said there's just a few problems. The mathematics is only a theory. The receivers we have today aren't fast enough. The software hasn't been written, and the computers that the software is going to be written for haven't been finished yet either, but we're going to do it anyway. Would you like to help us? And what do you think a 20-year-old who knows nothing about receivers, nothing about navigation, says to an invitation like that? Of course. Of course. You go out there with all the blind optimism and enthusiasm of youth, and you figure out you do know things. You can help. You can be part of a team who's doing something amazing. And yes, we did deliver the GPS satellite navigation system to the government, and it does work on jets and airplanes. And now I have one on my phone, and I have one in my car, and it's absolutely fantastic that this has progressed so much. And it makes me even more sure that the things that our kids are going to do are things we haven't even thought of yet. Things that are so amazing, we can't even barely comprehend what they're going to be. This not only didn't exist 30 years ago, it wasn't even possible to think about doing it. And yet, now we all have one, and we depend on it. And I worked in education over the next several years. It's a long story. I'm happy to tell you guys about my life journey. But in working with education, this thing called the maker movement started to come up onto my radar the last few years. And the maker movement is this global revolution of people learning and using tools in a new way. Tools that are easy to access, easy to use, and they share in an open source way, and they share using the internet. So people are doing things with 3D printers and microcontrollers, and then sharing them. So people in Somalia who need water sensors don't have to wait for the government to come or a university or a big company. They can go on the internet and find the answers to their problems themselves, and then upload their solutions that someone else in a different country can use. There are people taking charge of their own world and their own problems and learning how to do these new things in unprecedented ways. I could show you facts and figures about the billions of dollars that are going to be coming out of the maker movement, the new jobs, the new economies, the revolutionary technologies that are all being introduced by people all over the world, just like us, who are connected and sharing. But what I think for educators, the thing is that this is not just a global revolution economically, it's a global revolution in learning and how we share information. And that's what fascinates me. I don't know, has anyone been to a maker fair? A couple people? They're absolutely fascinating. This is something, if you have a chance to do it, they're proliferating all over the planet. The biggest one in Northern California every year is in May. Last year, 130,000 people came. And if you've never been to a maker fair, it's sort of like a cross between a Star Trek convention and a Renaissance festival, and there are people walking around with, it's completely fun, and there's robots and things on fire, and it's great. But when you walk around as an educator looking for signs of learning, you really see interesting things. I'm going to show you a little clip from a New York Maker Fair, and put on your kind of anthropologist hat and think about the learning that's happening here.
All right, Treehouse, we made it to Queens, New York, to the World Maker Fair. Now, Maker Fairs are basically a large festival where the most creative and original and innovative inventors from around the country meet and show off what they've made. And I don't know about you, but I'm ready to go check this out. Come on. These are my buddies, Gabby and Alice. I like your hat.
Thank you.
What are you guys doing here today?
Well, we're Scraptacular, and Scraptacular inspires environmental awareness by working with children and communities to transform trash into art and science. Our message is to be aware of everything that you throw out and be original and creative.
All right, Andrew, what does this do?
So this is my automatic dog feeder. It has an Arduino in the back. When you go to the Arduino's website, it tells the servo to turn and feed the dog.
Have you ever thought about selling this concept to like Purina or Kibbles and Bits?
Hopefully, if it gets good enough, I'll be able to publish the plans online so people can make it themselves, make their own versions.
We are riding the Austin Bike Zoo's 13-foot tall monarch butterfly.
All right, Nick, so what is this, what is this?
It's my omnidirectional wheeled robot.
And omnidirectional meaning what?
It goes in whatever direction I choose, so.
So Levi.
Yep.
You shoot marshmallows.
Yes, we shoot marshmallows. Yep.
The way this works is that when the marshmallow hits this dead end here, it allows the air behind it to pressurize, which builds up more pressure for it to go out the end faster. Do you see this? This is one gigantic contraption. The man who made it is Mark Perez. What is this, dude?
It's a giant Rube Goldberg machine. This is modeled after the 1963 Milton Bradley board game Mousetrap.
So this is almost exactly what the board game would have been like?
Well, yeah, I've got some artistic liberties. Instead of that cage at the end, you know, that little cage used to rattle down, we use a 2-ton bank sand.
All right, Treehouse, I present to you Raj.
Hey Raj, how are you?
Good, Raj. How you been?
Pretty good, Raj.
Well, Raj, what do you got going on?
Well, here I have an EMG-controlled prosthetic hand, which is the first of its kind in that it allows for individual digit control. So you can control every single finger individually.
So that was cut down from about a half an hour. And if you go, you just walk around and see amazing thing after amazing thing. A lot of them from people, from kids who are enamored, who are engaged in doing these kinds of amazing futuristic things. So when my co-author of the book, Gary Steger, and I started going to these maker fairs, we talked to a lot of people, and we heard from a lot of the makers that school had not served them well. But there they were, doing amazing things, that they were obviously learning and doing things that no one had done before. And we also talked to a lot of parents, and the parents told us things like, you know, look at my kid, they're programming, they're building robots, and every day they're totally engaged in these kinds of activities, and then every night I have to tear them away and we cry over worksheets. Something's happened to school. Something's gone wrong. And they don't understand. They don't know what's happened. It wasn't like they remember, because they hammered nails into wood and they, you know, watched snails and grew plants, and things like that were happening when they went to school. And they feel like they want school to work. These are the good parents. These are the ones we want on our team and we need on our team. The ones who are willing to take their kids to Maker Faire and science museums and things like that. And they're starting to lose faith in school. And that just hurts. You know, it hurts when you know how hard it is, that we all work to try and make schools better places for kids. So we decided to try and write this book to build a bridge between these new communities, to bring some of the excitement of the maker movement and the educational aspects of what makers are doing to schools, because it's extremely appropriate. This isn't, you know, some new idea from outer space. This is the way learning happens. We know kids learn by doing projects. They explore deeper, they learn more, they get more engaged. So how do we bring that back into schools? I think the maker movement has some interesting tools, materials, and also this mindset, this sort of MacGyver mindset of we'll get it done no matter what, that I think is really fascinating and engaging for kids. And we also know that educators need to be able to make the case for making in the classroom. So a lot of that is in the book. And the things I'll be talking about today, everything in the book, everything I talk about today is linked to on my website, inventtolearn.com. If you hear me say something, it's absolutely there. There's a resource section. There's also professional development with all kinds of handouts and resource lists and the kinds of tools we use in our professional development. And then since we self-published the book, sort of a maker fashion, we decided, well, since now we're a publishing company, we'll make more. We released a book on 3D printing written by David Thornburg, who I'm sure many of you know. And then we just came out with a brand new book called Sylvia's super awesome project book, Super Simple Arduino. I don't know if any of you have seen Super Awesome Sylvia's Super Awesome Maker Show. It's a web show. It's got millions of viewers. She's been doing this since she was 8 years old. She shows how to use Arduinos and rockets and programming and all kinds of fun things. And we just literally, I grabbed this as I was running out the door. She has written and illustrated a fantastic children's book about microcontroller programming and building fun inventions for kids. So we're excited to bring kids' books, books for teachers, to really engage, and re-engage education with this maker movement. And if you'd like to know more, if you send an email to friend@inventtolearn.com, you'll be automatically added to the mailing list. And don't worry, we won't spam you, not that ambitious. We get out a newsletter every once in a while, but you'll learn about like the new books and releases like that. So when I talk to schools about the maker movement, I often focus on the tools, the things that are worth doing, because just making isn't good enough. We have to be able to say why this fits into the objectives we want to teach, the STEM, the history, everything across the board. These are the kinds of tools I focus on. In our book, we named 3 game changers. These first 3, computer-controlled fabrication, physical computing, and programming. And I think these, plus everything else, has the most potential to change the way we teach and learn. So I'm going to go through those just a little bit. First of all, fabrication. Anybody have a 3D printer? Every month, more and more hands go up. These are starting to come into schools. So a fabrication technology is an additive technology. You're building up sort of like a layer cake, and in fact, this is, see if my laser will reach all the way over there. The top left is pastry being made by a 3D printer and chocolate. Over on the top right, this is a storefront in New York where you can walk in and get anything you want made. You can even walk into a scanner, get a 3D scan of yourself, and get a little mini-me printed in plastic or gold, whatever you want to pay for. The bottom right is a CNN show about shoes. I actually think that shoes are probably going to be one of the first consumer 3D printed things available for you. And then the bottom left is something that's completely revolutionizing medicine. They're 3D printing, like this is an exoskeleton for this little girl. She can't lift up her arms. With this exoskeleton that they can build cheaply and quickly, which is important for little kids, she can now pick up a pen, hold a cup, do the things that other kids do. I saw that doctor on CNN, and he said that 1 in 3,000 children have some sort of muscular deficiency in the United States. They're printing ears out of cow cartilage. They're printing livers and kidneys out of cells. All of this is coming out of an ability to build and design things in 3 dimensions, whereas we all have printers now, they only print in 2 dimensions. Now, you might think, well, that's interesting, but how does that work in school? If you go online, there are repositories of files that you can download and print out things that other people have designed. Like this is MakerBot's Thingiverse. You can go, you type in Greek, you get Greek letters, Greek temples. But it's not just that you can replicate them. You can bring them into software called computer-aided design software that industrial designers use, that architects use. Only there are versions now available for younger and younger audiences. You can take these and do whatever you want with them. Make them bigger or smaller, obviously, or maybe you want to put a second story on your Greek temple. I don't think you could do that back then, but now you can. Print those things out and then upload the files and share them worldwide. If that's not enough, this is happening. I think every museum is going to start 3D scanning its artifacts in. The Smithsonian has, the British Museum has, and that's not just the stuff that's on display. That's everything in your catalog. You can download in an instant, print out fossils, viruses, Lincoln's death mask. It changes the meaning of primary source to something you can hold. I'm going to show you a little video from another museum, the American Natural History Museum. They're using 3D printers to teach kids about paleontology.
I didn't think that we were going to go as far as to make dinosaurs with 3D printing. We're literally printing a skeleton.
Capturing dinosaurs is the first time the museum has tried to use digital fabrication as a way to teach young people about science, specifically about paleontology. They are being given a group of real fossils. Along with these bones, they're being given the tools to be able to create 3D models of them.
What's really cool and sort of unique about this program is you get to go to places that the public do not have access to normally. You also get to meet real scientists.
We got to see where they prep the fossils. We got to see all the places they scan 3D in the museum. We got to see all this really cool stuff that I never even knew they had.
To be able to say that you actually held a dinosaur fossil, it was exciting.
The paleontology department was kind enough to give us a lot of the bones from Allosaurus, which is from the Jurassic. Part of the program was that we did not tell them the animal that they were scanning. So part of the puzzle was looking at the bones that they were scanning and trying to figure out which dinosaur did it come from. A lot of students thought it was T-Rex. Some thought it came from a long-necked sauropod.
Our classroom is actually the Museum of Natural History. The students are able to go out into the halls and look at the actual exhibits when they have a question about, for instance, how did the Allosaurus hold its hand?
The youth took literally between 5,000 to 6,000 photos, which were then turned into about 150 different models. Every time they were taking a photo, every time they looked at a model, every time they tried to stitch those models together, they were looking with careful detail at minute aspects of those bones, the same thing that paleontologists do.
It really taught me how paleontologists reconstruct and study dinosaurs and how they have to deal with disarticulated bones from different individuals and broken bones.
I didn't expect to see what we put together to actually come out. It was really precise.
The fact that I was able to remake the bone was really exciting and just amazing.
It has inspired me to maybe one day even go to college for paleontology. I always thought that I always wanted to work with technology, but now after doing this, I learned that I can do both of them together. But I feel that I can do this.
I could do this. You want kids to be able to say that, to believe that. And you know, that same young man, when he said disarticulated bones, that wasn't a vocabulary word. That was real. He learned that by doing it. And then you can teach the vocabulary. A lot of times in schools we swap it. We teach the kids the vocabulary and then we expect them to apply it when things happen. I believe that experiences need to come first. And some of the tools that I'm showing you today give you the ability to have small, quick experiences that really reinforce the kinds of things we want kids to learn. You know, we want kids to see science as a detective story that they can play a part of. We want them to see mathematics as a way to understand and predict their world. And we want them to see engineering as a way to change the world. We have to give them the tools to make that happen. You know, so still on the subject of fabrication, another way to get things into the printer is to scan them. Scanners are getting cheaper and cheaper all the time. And if you have barely any money, you can build one yourself. This is an instructable website. It's a terrific website full of projects and ideas using all kinds of different electronics. This project is an Easy Connect 3D scanner built out of an Xbox controller and a couple of spare parts. But that's really not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is the bio. Everyone who submits an Instructable can put a bio. And I know it's tiny, but I'll read it. This bio says, "Hey Instructables, I'm Todd and I'm 14 years old from Illinois. My interests are hacking, making, engineering, programming, teaching, making, and aviation. I love teaching others about technology." Do you think Todd's school knows this? No, probably not. It's kind of sad, huh? I mean, here's a kid who's being invited by the world to share his expertise. And that's what's happening out there. The world is inviting kids and saying, we care. We care about your interests. You want to teach others about technology? Here you go. You make an Instructable, you upload it. You make a dog feeder, you can share it with the world. You make a YouTube video and maybe it'll go viral. The kids know this, right? They all run over with their cameras. Maybe this is going to be the one that goes viral. The world is extending an invitation to our kids that we should know about and we can take advantage of. We can take advantage of their willingness to participate, the natural altruism of kids who want to help make the world a better place by recycling scrap into science and art projects, or by making a dog feeder. And when the interviewer said, "You want to sell this to Purina?" he was like, "No, you're crazy. Of course not." He wants to just share it. Our kids are hearing this, and I think that schools should hear it too. And schools are using 3D printing to do things like building a wind-powered car, building prosthetic devices, because like this is a middle school classroom in New York City. Kids say things like, when I first saw the 3D printer and the things we could make, it seemed so complicated. But wait, it's just shapes. You want kids to have that idea that they can break down anything, not just 3D problems, but any problem, into something that they can tackle and that they have the tools to solve. And if they don't have the tools to solve it, maybe someone out there has the solution. And maybe if they come up with a better solution, they can share it. And they can be part of a global initiative to help people solve real problems. There are people running around the Sudan with 3D printers strapped on the back of mopeds, printing out prosthetics for kids who've had their hands blown off in landmines accidents. You know, this, being a part of this, you know this changes these kids' lives, it changes a family, changes a village, it changes the whole world. And our kids can participate in that. Physical computing is, I think, the second game changer. Now, you may know physical computing as robotics. It's adding interactivity to anything in the real world and getting data from the real world into the computer. There are incredibly low-cost, open-source microcontrollers, small computers, hardware and software that's being invented every single day. The one on the left is a Raspberry Pi. The little tiny credit card thing in the middle, that's the computer. It can run video, it can add in a keyboard and a mouse. You've got a Linux computer. It's just come down. I need to change this slide. The price has suddenly gotten lower. The Arduino in the middle is an open source microcontroller. Microcontroller is not a whole computer. Microcontroller, though, does certain things really well, like it reads a sensor and turns a wheel, or it reads takes data and sends it to the computer. So you can see it's really good for like embedding interactivity into robots and vehicles and drones and things like that. This whole Internet of Things is coming. You may be hearing more about this. It's everything from your like refrigerator reading the barcode and knowing your milk is going to expire and things, you know, it's those kinds of consumer things. Your cars are very computerized now. This is going to be happening more and more and more as these low-cost microcontrollers. The Arduino is about $25. You can get $8 clones in China. And the clones are perfectly legal because it's all open source. Kids can do things like this.
You ripped open his back. What's the matter with you? I had to. You did so much surgery on him.
Nice. I had to. You know, wouldn't you like your kids to walk in and feel that way about like algebra or something? But this is a completely appropriate middle school project, hacking your stuffy. There are lots of ways to use microcontrollers. That's a magic 8-ball that's been deconstructed and reinvented. Now they can program their new magic 8-ball to say anything they like. That's a Halloween lantern. Down on the bottom right is a sign language glove. It reads sign language. That was just being shown at the Atlanta Maker Faire not too long ago. And on the bottom left, I think, is a whole category of really interesting microcontrollers called lily pads. They're wearable computing. These are sewn into clothes. Now, the round purple thing on the ballet slippers is exactly the same as the blue square thing right above it. Exactly the same, only it's made to be sewn into clothes. It's round because those tabs on the end are where you sew the conductive thread so that the controller in your jacket, the thread runs down the sleeve to the buttons or the speakers or the lights or whatever it is on your jacket that you can now program. It invites a different kind of kid into the process of making, and yet gives them exactly the same experience of electronics and programming and you know, controlling things in their world. I'm going to show you a few lily pad examples. So this is a bicycle patch that's programmable. Gown actually changes shape.
Read from right to left, each light is a stitch.
Access granted.
I'm still not sure what this is. There are thousands of uses for these wearable devices that are going to become more and more prevalent. The latest version of the LilyPad has GPS installed in that little, 50-cent piece size microcontroller. There's amazing things that are going to be happening, and I think your kids can learn how to do them today. There's nothing that complicated about what I just showed you. Now, 5 years ago, these were all like PhD dissertation topics, but today you can buy these components for just a few dollars. I know no one has any money, and yet these things are extremely inexpensive and interesting, and an introduction to for kids to computing in a way that I think is very personal and very approachable for lots of different kinds of kids. One of the most fascinating things to me is the new low-cost sensors that are available today, because I think sensors help answer the question, is any making good enough? We have to be able to say what we're doing with this equipment. It's not just for fun. And sensors answer that question because you're collecting real data from the real world. This is an earth science kit. There's water level, there's soil moisture. You can take data from the real world and then take it into your computer and process it. We're going to be talking a lot more. I've got 2 more sessions today. One is about getting started, and I'll be showing a lot of equipment like this, like what's a good baseline equipment to buy. And then the other session is more about classroom practice, assessment, prompts, challenges in a maker classroom. This is a Braille printer. So Braille printers cost about $2,000. So the inventor of this Braille printer thought, well, I don't think it needs to cost that much. I'm going to try and make one out of a Mindstorms kit. Mindstorm kit costs about $300. So sure enough, he did it. And you know the punchline, he's 12 years old, right? So he's now put the plans online, just like the kid with the dog feeder, because he wants other people to make it better. I cut this directly off his Facebook page, and he says exactly that. He was going to make a cool app or make some Minecraft cheat sheet, but why not help other people? And his parents were advised to get a patent, but why? He wants to share it with the world to make to help disadvantaged people. These kids are out there. I think this is a recurring theme with our kids that we should answer, we should help them with. Third game changer is programming. And you can see that programming has crept into all of these other things. There's programming by itself, and there's programming to help control and make sense of the world. This is an hour of code week, yes? Yeah? I know. I love hour of code. I'm glad we're doing an hour of code, but we all know an hour is not enough, right? We got to get this stuff started. If you don't know about Scratch, Scratch is an absolutely lovely way to get started. It's free. It's from MIT. It was created by people who know a lot about learning, which I really appreciate. Some programming languages are great for doing work. Scratch is a great language for learning because it was designed that way. There are millions of projects available on the Scratch website. Kids have uploaded all kinds of fun stuff to do, school stuff, animation, storytelling, and what's really fascinating is there's a whole bunch of new robotics equipment that when you plug it into your computer and you're running Scratch, new commands just appear magically in Scratch. Like this is a heartbeat sensor. When you plug it in, all of a sudden you can immediately read the heartbeat sensor right into your Scratch programming language. This is all coming together right now. This is all going to be getting easier and more accessible and more reliable. But today you can still do this is available today. This isn't in the future. Now, All those things I talked about were computers, had computers in them. You might be saying, well, does it have to have computers? Is it all about technology? Well, we're at a technology conference, so the answer should be yes, but it's not always yes. You know, don't throw away stuff that works. There's nothing better than cardboard than to build big, cheap things. And yet, you can buy, Make Do is a product with lockable plastic hinges that help you make cardboard structures that are really sturdy. You can also 3D print hinges and pieces for cardboard construction. Rollerbox are those wheels, those little blue wheels you see on this. And Hummingbird is a terrific kit. In fact, they're here. If you have a chance, go see the Hummingbird people. It's absolutely fabulous for making cardboard robots. I'm going to play this video.
You ready? This is the dog. You put him to sleep. It's dark. Wake him up. You can feed him. Get them to see stuff, and otherwise it's me going. You can adjust his eyes. Like, yeah, we could do this. But if they come in, you can drive him. Tell him to move. Then I'm hoping they'll be the ones coming to me with projects. I'd like to do this. And that's about it.
Again, working with scratch, working with found and recycled materials. In a way, you're making a cardboard robot. There's squishy circuit dough. Homemade Play-Doh, two recipes, one is conductive, one is non-conductive. You can play with circuits. There's all kinds of new conductive materials. These girls have painted a piano with conductive paint, and they've built the buzzers that are making the music. This is an after-school program for kids in 5th grade. This is not expensive or hard to do. There's conductive thread, conductive foil, conductive paint, all kinds of new things that are coming out. Conductive foil is great for interactive paper craft. You want to make a pop-up book that lights up and plays music, you can do all of this. This is just cardstock and copper foil and cool LEDs. You can also do felt. You can sew things and make, fun things that kids can wear or build, or bracelets that play music or light up. I'm going to show you this one video. This is what I think is kind of this is the Makey, with which you can turn anything in the world into a keyboard interface. I think the Makey is kind of the proto-maker tool. I highly recommend the Makey. You're going to see why. I'll just play the video. What happened to the sound? The sound disappeared. Oh. So graphite is conductive. And water is conductive. They've got foil pads on the staircase. Bananas are extremely conductive, and people too. So water plus cat plus foil is conductive. So they put that video online on a Kickstarter and asked for $25,000 so they could manufacture the boards a little more reliably, and they raised $568,000. Because I think people want to play. They want to invent. And the Makey is a spectacularly easy to use piece of equipment to do this physical computing, to connect the real world to the computer. And schools are using it too. Like, this is an elementary school. The 5th graders were challenged to make a carnival game to make carnival games that the second graders could play. So this is a ring toss game. When the aluminum foil ring touches the contacts, it triggers something and through the makey, and something happens on the computer. So you could program sounds, keep score, play animations, do whatever you like. So how do you think the second graders feel when they walk in and see a carnival, a handmade carnival made by their older peers? They think fifth grade is going to be pretty cool. And those fifth graders feel like, I've done something amazing, because they have. This is a high school engineering class that's using the makey. They partner with a local special needs school. They interview the kids about what they can do. Do they have control of their hands or their feet, whatever, and what's their favorite game. And then they create new game controllers, each individually made for these kids. I think this is an entirely appropriate high school level engineering design project. And in fact, I just found out yesterday that Purdue has picked up this curriculum and is spreading it widely through the K-12 network of schools that they work with for engineering. So I do want to take a detour to the real world, because that's what we're talking about, right? I mean, we want kids to get good jobs and live in the real world and feel competent and be lifelong learners. So I'll tell you about one of my experiences in the real world. When I was in engineering and we were building the GPS satellite system, we were all using what was called the waterfall design methodology. That's what I'd been taught in college. That's what engineers for thousands of years have been taught. You start with the design, you do the best you can, you get your plans absolutely perfect, you go down each step of this waterfall, because it's really hard to go back up. Mistakes are risky, mistakes are expensive, right? You can't afford to make any mistakes starting from day one. Well, in the 80s, they called us all back in and said, we're changing it all. There's this whole new design methodology in town called spiral design. Spiral design doesn't start with a perfect plan. You don't even sit down and figure out what the last day of your project is going to look like. You figure out what's the most important thing to start with. And then you iterate around this spiral. You try things, you build them, hopefully you have an audience. You know how Google, everything's always in beta? Well, you're part of the spiral. You're quadrant 3. When you click on a button that the Google engineers really didn't think was that important, and millions of people always click on that button, they go, oh, well, we should pay more attention to that. And that button that they thought was really important that nobody clicks on, it just silently disappears, right? So then they take another spin around the iterative design cycle. Now, in the last decades, this has now become, you might have heard of rapid design, agile development, all kinds of different ways that real engineers and real scientists use this iterative design methodology. This is the real world. It's not the scientific method. It's not the waterfall step by step. So schools kind of need to step up and figure out how to do iterative design in the classroom. Now, I know that takes time, and I know time is a precious commodity in schools, but we do have to figure out how to bring this into schools. So what happened in the 80s that made this possible? Well, the answer is affordable computing. The computer made iterative design possible. And in fact, if you talk to an architect like Frank Gehry, he will tell you his computer is his design partner. He cannot build buildings like this. This is not possible without the computer. Not to look things up or to draw plans, but to actually help him do the design. He is in constant communication with this machine, and they are building his vision together. This is a museum in Melbourne, and somewhere in there is a load-bearing structure, and I'm just glad there was a computer there to figure that out. You guys recognize this? This is the Twin Towers Memorial in New York City. These are the inverted fountains with the names of the people who died in the Twin Towers around these bronze plaques. So when they designed this, they had an idea. They said, you know, we don't want to put them in an order of like how they died or something that's kind of morbid. We want to celebrate their lives. So they had an idea. They sent out surveys to the families of everyone who was going to be on the plaque. And they said, who else did your loved one know who died that day? And they got back much more than they expected. Incredible networks of people who knew each other, who'd grown up together, you know, cousins and brothers-in-laws and friends since first grade. And they said, well, now we have to figure out how to do this, because There's physical limitations. You know, you can't put a seam of these plaques down the middle of a name. You have to spread them out nicely. And now we've got all these, what they called meaningful adjacencies. So they hired a guy, well, actually he volunteered. He did this for free. His day job is data artist in residence at the New York Times. And that's a real job. Data artist in residence. May not be on your college counselor, guidance counselor poster, but a lot of careers are going this way, where you have to be able to deal with data. So what he did, what any good data artist would do, is he used a language called processing to help him figure this problem out. He figured out an algorithm, and he fed all the data into it, and then he tweaked. And if you read an interview with him, it's really interesting because he talks about the process of working on an algorithm with the computer. The computer does a little work, he looks at it, he sees what he likes, he goes back and tweaks the algorithm back and forth, until he says the computer got him about 85–90% of the way there, and then he as an artist had to figure out the rest of the work. So now when you go to this memorial, you're not only seeing a person, you're seeing the people who they knew in life. And when the families go, their loved one is surrounded by people that they knew in life too. And I think that's incredibly touching. You know, I think that when people tell me that computers are cold and it's antisocial and it's the death of, like, you know, humanity, I find computers to be incredibly compelling, and the problems you can solve to be the highest, the most interesting things that people have never thought of. And I think we need to be able to give these experiences to kids, because kids care about these things too. They care about aesthetics. They care about the way, who they are in the world. And using a computer that they can present these things this way. So obviously the question is, can we do this in school? Right? We all know the problems. We could sit here for another hour and talk about the bell schedule, and you can't, and the subjects, and why there's no room. You know, there's all those reasons. But I think the big reason is something called homeostasis. And I'll let Sheldon from the Big Bang Theory explain that.
I'm a big fan of homeostasis. Do you know what that is?
Of course not.
Yeah. Homeostasis refers to a system's ability to regulate its internal environment and maintain a constant condition of properties like temperature or pH.
Worst bedtime story ever.
So homeostasis isn't just about physical systems. It's about institutions too. We know how hard it is to change school, and yet we have to do it anyway. We have to do it without resorting to tricks, because there's always been a trick. There's always been this imaginary idea that if we just plug kids into something, they'll get the learning downloaded into them. And we can't fall for that. We know how hard it is, right, to provide an amazing learning environment for kids. It doesn't mean that we don't want to do it. Of course we want to do it. So, you know, I know I've said a lot of words. You know, microcontrollers and makey-makeys, and, you know, people kind of get freaked out. It's like, oh my God, what do I do? What do I do? What do I choose? What you talking about? I think you have to have sort of a vision of learning to be able to choose, to be able to avoid the tricks that are going to derail your plans. I think you have to have a manifesto, because you can evaluate everything, every makey-makey, every microcontroller, every, you know, game that's supposed to revolutionize education against this manifesto. Now, this is what I believe about learning, because learning is very personal. What I believe is that learning occurs when a new experience makes connections to existing knowledge, and learning cannot be delivered to the learner. This is a process that's happening inside each learner's head. And that the best way to ensure understanding inside your head is through active construction of shareable things outside of your head. Now, if you sort of time travel back to grad school, you'll see that the first two are Piaget's constructivism, right? That knowledge is a consequence of experience, as he said so eloquently. The third one is an addition from Seymour Papert, the father of educational technology, the inventor of the Logo programming language, which Scratch is a direct descendant of, called constructionism. That when you construct things outside of your head, it cements the knowledge inside of your head. And that can be anything outside of your head. It can be a computer program, a poem, you know, any kind of artifact that you're building outside of your head. And it's important that it's shareable and that it's meaningful to you and meaningful to other people. Because if you don't have a learning manifesto, this is what happens. Right? Why is Hoboken throwing away all its laptops? Because they didn't really know what they wanted to do with them. They went shopping, right? And what I worry about is that in 3 years, what we'll see is Hoboken is throwing away all of its 3D printers because 3D printers didn't change education, right? So we can't just go shopping. I love shopping, right? But making is more than just the stuff. We have to know what we're planning to do. We have to have the learning objectives set. And Seymour Papert also said that the role of the teacher is to create the conditions for invention rather than provide ready-made knowledge, which kind of gives us a clue of how these things can be used in the classroom. It's about invention. It's not about us telling the kids what to do. It's about us giving them tools, amazing new tools, and letting them explore the big ideas of science and technology and history and mathematics. I think you need to have a simple design process. You need to get started. That's the most important thing. Get the kids going and making something, because once they make something, they'll get better at making it. And then the second time, the third time, the fourth time, their skills will increase so they can make more complex things, more interesting things. And if they're using computers, as Seymour Papert also said, you can make more interesting things. I think another thing with these new tools is the ability to measure, to predict, and to analyze. And that's something that you can scale. You can start off with a kindergarten project, because everybody kind of gets it in kindergarten, right? The kids are playing in the sandbox. They go, oh, they're little engineers, isn't that cute? And then we sort of lose the plot as they get older. We forget how to turn concrete experiences into academic experiences. We just tell the kids the academics and hope that they'll sort of catch on that this actually applies to the real world. So at every age, you can ask the kids more complicated questions. How cold, if you're building a refrigerator out of recycled materials, as these middle schoolers are, how cold can it get? If you put a block of ice in it, how long will the ice last? And then defend why their design is going to keep the ice colder with data, right? So you have to be able to collect the data. You have to be able to analyze the data. All of those things can be done now with tools from the maker movement. I think you want to provide these materials and also inspiration. Just like you take kids to go see a Shakespeare play, even though they don't understand all the big words, or to go hear Mozart, even though they don't understand the mathematical principles behind, music, they get inspired by the feeling. This is a PhD student who's working at the intersection of technology and art. So she's created an interactive painting, and when she blows on the dandelions seeds like fly away. There's music and everything. Now she's going to peel this back and you'll see what's underneath. So what's underneath is copper tape, LEDs, sensors, the lily pads, and she's programmed her art. Now on the right side is a second grade project about the solar system. So when you push the little paper tab, it makes a connection and the LEDs light up. And when you turn it over, it's exactly the same as this artist's work. So I think that by creating these experiences that inspire kids, you can really take this up a notch. You want to look for materials and spaces that invite reflection, invite agency. And, like I said, making isn't a shopping list. It's not a special place either. It's a stance towards learning. So you may be thinking, this is all a lot of sort of arts and craftsy summer camp stuff. You walk back into your school and your administrator is going, yeah, we know where that belongs, summer camp. But MIT doesn't agree. Their admissions process now includes a maker portfolio. The standards and curriculum support this. Not the bullet points that on Tuesday, October 14th, you're supposed to be doing improper fractions. But if you read the overarching standards, they're calling for deeper, more meaningful assessment, real research, real tools. And you can go back in history. We stand on the shoulders of giants. We can listen to Piaget. There's new research from Stanford and the Harvard Graduate School about making and making empowerment. But, you know, I really get excited when I talk to kids, like Talon. And he says things like, I can do things really quickly now that I know how to look at stuff. He's thinking with his head, his eyes, his hands, his whole body. His whole being knows that he can do things. Because I think a lot of people talk about how engaging technology is. I think they get it wrong. I think the bells and whistles get kind of old quickly. You know, you can't do engagement to a kid. You can't do empowerment to a kid. Kids are engaged by doing powerful things, things that they care about and that other people care about. And this is a cycle of citizenship. If we're just doing digital citizenship of telling kids the rules, that's not really being part of a community, because that's the definition of citizenship. Being a member of a community that cares about you and that you provide value to. And I think this kind of technology put in kids' hands is absolutely empowering. And I can tell you one more thing, you can't have empowered kids without empowered teachers. Teachers who have agency and control over their classroom and their curriculum. This is some videos of some of the projects that teachers did. We run a 4-day summer institute called Constructing Modern Knowledge. It's in New Hampshire every summer. These are projects that teachers with absolutely no experience in technology did. Big wall sound sculptures, an iPhone time lapse, self-watering plants, a chicken coop that responds to light and dark. These are the kinds of things that teachers have the potential of doing if given the opportunity. And when you feel what it feels like to learn like this, you can go back to your classroom and really change how the classroom works. I invite you to take a look at this year's Constructing Modern Knowledge. We have an absolutely fabulous lineup of people. Leah Beakley is the inventor of the lily pad that I showed you. So we're going to be doing a lot of wearables probably this year. And I think that essentially this still isn't about technology. I had a teacher come up to me at the end of last year and said to me, this has been a fantastic experience. It's going to change the way everything happens in my classroom. And I said, oh, your project was great. You know, they've done this amazing thing. She said, no, that's not the story. She said, on day one, when we did our brainstorming, we chose our projects and we chose our groups, we worked like 3 or 4 hours. We were just grinding and nothing was happening, and the ideas seemed to just disappear, and I wasn't sure I really liked these people, and you know, I just felt like I had to get up. So I got up and I walked outside, got a cup of coffee, came back inside, and my group said, where have you been? We had this amazing breakthrough. We missed you, you know, and they hugged me, and we sat down, and like blink of an eye, it was 4 days later, we built this amazing thing. I didn't know anything about technology, and look what we've done. And she was like, but that's not it. She said, last night in the middle of the night, I woke up in a cold sweat and said, when do my kids get a cup of coffee? Because if you'd walked up behind me, she was telling me, if you'd walked up behind me as I was walking out that door, tapped me on the shoulder and said, get back to work, which is what I do to my kids, I would have gone upstairs, packed my bags, and gone home. That would have been the end of it for me. And yet, giving people the time to take a deep breath, to be reflective on their own work, and to think about their own process changes the way that people approach their own learning. And she was going to take that lesson back to her classroom, and a lot of technology. So I want to encourage you to look into the Maker Movement. Please take a look at our Summer Institute or any of the other professional development we offer. I think the Maker Movement offers some really interesting tools, technology, and sort of a mindset to really tackle the big problems that we want kids to grapple with, and to give kids the tools to change the world, because that's what it's all about. So I thank you very much for your kind attention this morning, and let's go out there and make it happen.